Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. When you hear about Chinese car makers, outmaneuvering traditional giants at major auto shows, do you ever wonder if it's really a clear sign of their unstoppable ascent? Or maybe, is there a far more complex and frankly brutal story happening behind the scenes that's actually driving this global push? Today, we're going to unpack the intense competition within the Chinese car making industry and what it means for global markets, especially for Europe. This isn't just about flashy new models. It's really about the economic forces, the policy decisions, and the strategic pivots shaping the future of transportation. Okay, let's unpack this. We saw a really interesting signal at IAA Mobility 2025 in Munich. While BMW and Mercedes-Benz had their elegant displays in the city's historic center, it was the main exhibition halls that truly told a compelling story. Right. Brands like BYD, XPeng, Changan, and Dongfeng, they absolutely dominated.
They really did.
They were there in force, showing off electric vehicles with advanced tech and prices that often significantly undercut Western models. This wasn't just some fleeting visit. It felt like a clear signal of their long-term European intent, leaving many observers thinking, okay, the Chinese invasion is here.
Yeah, and what's truly remarkable here is that this outward push, this apparent dominance and ambition we saw in Europe, it contrasts so sharply with the troubles these firms are facing on their home turf. China's domestic market is incredibly brutal.
Brutal is the word.
We're talking about roughly 130 firms battling for sales, leading to chronic overcapacity. I mean, factories could, if they ran at full tilt for a year, churn out twice as many cars as there are actual buyers. It's almost comical if it weren't so tough for the companies involved.
Right. Imagine a baker who could bake 200 loaves a day, but only sells 100 eventually. Those unsold loaves are going to pile up and force some, desperate decisions.
Exactly.
And the consequence of that chronic overcapacity is, you can imagine, a savage price war. The numbers are pretty stark, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. The average car price has plummeted by 19% over the past 2 years, now sitting around, $23,000?
Yeah, about that.
And some specific models have seen these huge one-off cuts, like around 35%.
35%. That's just a massive hit to the market. Really makes you wonder how anyone is turning a profit.
Right. And this has severely strained profits across the board. Total industry net profits, and that includes foreign car makers too, fell 12% year on year in the first 5 months of 2025. Even firms that we think of as incredibly successful, like BYD, China's biggest car maker, reported a 30% drop in net profits in the second quarter of 2025.
Wow, even BYD?
Yeah, even as their revenues grew by 14%. It's a classic case of margin compression where sales go up, but profits, they go down. And it's not just the car makers, suppliers are also suffering. We're hearing reports of some delaying payments for up to 6 months, creating this ripple effect throughout the entire supply chain.
That really makes me think about the established foreign players. They once dominated the Chinese market, but they are clearly losing ground rapidly. Domestic brand share has climbed from, 34% in 2020 to a staggering 69% in the first 4 months of 2025.
69%. It's incredible.
As one analyst put it, foreign firms can't compete in a price war with locals. They're simply not built for this kind of cutthroat environment.
No, it's a different game.
It's a real challenge to their long-term strategy for China, which for decades was, let's face it, a massive cash cow.
A huge cash cow. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these tariff walls are significantly reshaping their export plans. The U.S., for example, has imposed that steep 100% tariff on China-built EVs, which, effectively closes that market.
Completely shut.
And the EU has followed suit, imposing anti-subsidy duties on top of its existing 10% base tariff. These measures, particularly the specific tariffs applied only to battery electric vehicles, the BEV-specific EU duties, are forcing Chinese manufacturers to adapt their pricing and strategy for European markets. It makes it a much more complex proposition than simply shipping cars over.
So, with the home market being so punishing and some key export markets putting up walls, exports have become this crucial pressure valve for all that overcapacity. China was actually the world's top vehicle exporter in 2024, shipping approximately 6.4 million units.
A massive number.
And they've already shipped over 3 million in the first half of 2025. But I wonder, is that growth sustainable? Or are we starting to see signs that maybe the easy gains are over as those export numbers cool compared to the boom years of 2022, 2023?
That's the big question now.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, I think. When I first encountered this idea of permanent involution, this sort of destructive internal competition leading to diminishing returns, a race to the bottom. It felt incredibly bleak.
It does sound bleak.
But as we dig into the details, I'm starting to wonder if that framing might actually be missing a few crucial moving parts, maybe suggesting a more dynamic picture than it first appears.
I think you're right. That framing, while capturing the intensity, might overreach a bit, underestimating a few critical dynamics. For one, regulators in China are actively trying to discipline the market. Beijing intervened back in June, for instance.
Right, Airbus.
They summoned car makers, told them to end the aggressive price cuts and speed up payments to suppliers. Several major firms actually pledged to pay within 60 days. And there are also these public warnings against involution being issued. So it's not a hands-off approach at all.
Okay, I see your point about policy intervention, and Beijing's actions are certainly significant. But, I mean, given the sheer scale of the overcapacity we talked about, how effective can these directives truly be? Have we seen this kind of intervention successfully rebalance a market like this before? Or is it maybe more of a Band-Aid on a gaping wound?
That's a really valid question. The effectiveness will absolutely depend on consistent enforcement. But it's not just policy. Falling input costs matter significantly, too. We've seen battery pack prices fall, approximately 20% in 2024, down to about $115 per kilowatt hour.
That's a huge drop.
It is. And that dramatically lowers the sustainable cost floors. It means cheaper models can potentially be produced without necessarily leading to guaranteed margin destruction. So this suggests maybe a more rational cost adjustment is happening, not just a purely destructive race to the bottom.
Okay, but while those falling battery costs certainly change the equation, are they truly enough to sustain low prices and healthy margins across all the different players? I mean, in such a cutthroat market? Or does it just favor the leading few who have the scale and efficiency to really capitalize?
That's probably the crux of it. It likely favors the leaders, the bigger players with scale. And another area where a sort of blanket statement needs nuance is overcapacity itself. Those headline capacity numbers often blend together different things. You've got the shudder-prone joint venture internal combustion engine plants, which are rapidly becoming obsolete, let's be honest.
Right, legacy tech.
Mixed with the more flexible new energy vehicle lines and these new export-oriented additions. And Beijing's September plan explicitly aims to tighten market order and temper growth targets. They're aiming for, I think, 32.3 million vehicles total, with 15.5 million being NEVs.
So managing it down.
It signals more of a managed glide path, rather than just unchecked runaway growth.
Okay, let's talk tariffs. People often argue that tariffs don't really bite or they have minimal impact on such massive industries. What's your take? Are they truly toothless here, or is there a more nuanced effect playing out?
That's a critical question. Look, while Chinese share in Western Europe is still relatively modest, around 4.8% from January to July, maybe up to 5.2% in the first half of 2025, it is rising.
It is climbing.
More importantly, the OEMs are strategically pivoting. They are increasingly turning to hybrids to sidestep those BEV-specific EU duties we mentioned. And they are definitely accelerating EU localization efforts. BYD's plant in Hungary is the prime example everyone points to.
Anything where they sell.
Exactly. So tariffs don't stop growth entirely, no, but they certainly slow it down, they shape its trajectory, and they reroute it. You absolutely have to adapt.
That's a key distinction. Adaptation, not elimination. And speaking of Europe, it's constantly framed as the main target for Chinese manufacturers. But what's the broader context behind that focus? Is it just about Europe?
Well, Europe is attractive, yes, no doubt. But its appeal is significantly amplified by the fact that the U.S. is effectively closed off because of that 100% tariff.
Right. Nowhere else for those specific EVs to go at scale.
Pretty much. And markets like Russia and the global south have also absorbed significant volume since 2022. So the European push is as much about finding where you can still sell profitably as it is about some simple ambition to just conquer Europe. It's a strategic decision, really, driven by global market realities rather than Europe being the sole desired prize.
That makes sense. Okay, so with so many car makers still in China, is consolidation even possible? The idea that consolidation will be messy, not absent, feels particularly relevant here. Will it happen?
It's a crucial point. Local government protection often slows down forced mergers. We've seen examples like those failed plans for tie-ups between Chang'an and FAW, or Chang'an and Dongfeng.
Why did they fail?
Largely due to provincial interests, basically protecting their local champions, their jobs, their tax base.
Local politics.
But central policy levers like Controlling credit, enforcing payment discipline, and imposing stricter standards, these are already putting pressure on the smaller, loss-making firms. The policy direction from Beijing seems clear: tighter rules and an eventual shakeout. It feels like the timing, not the inevitability, is what remains unknown.
So less about if and more about when and maybe how painful it will be.
Precisely.
This brings us neatly to what we should watch next, maybe some of the more contrarian angles and future implications. Could these current low prices actually be sustainable? Or is there a breaking point approaching for the cost base versus this relentless price war dynamic?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? Battery and cell price trends, along with those chemistry shifts, we're seeing like the increasing use of LFP, that's lithium iron phosphate, and even sodium ion for the real entry-level segments. These could allow the leading players to sustain low prices without bleeding red ink. However, and this is a big however, if key input costs like lithium were to suddenly reinflate significantly, then permanent low prices become much less permanent very quickly.
Right. It's all dependent on those input costs staying low.
It's a delicate balance, constantly shifting with material costs and tech advancements.
And how might Chinese manufacturers try to circumvent existing and even future trade barriers? What kind of regulatory end runs might we see develop?
Well, we should definitely expect to see more in Europe, for Europe strategies, meaning more local manufacturing plants like BYD in Hungary, and crucially, the development of EU type approval software stacks specifically tailored for the European market. Essentially, making sure their vehicles comply with all European regulations and standards right from the ground up, reducing friction at the border and with consumers.
Makes sense.
And the offensive for hybrid models, which, again, crucially avoid those BEV-specific EU duties, that's already happening, and I think will likely accelerate significantly.
Interesting pivot. Okay, this leads me to wonder if car sales themselves could eventually become just one piece of a much broader revenue puzzle for these companies. Could we see a really significant profit mix shift down the line?
Absolutely, that's a definite possibility.
Right.
If things like advanced driver assistance systems, ADS, or connectivity subscriptions, and maybe even energy services like vehicle-to-grid,
VTG?
where your car powers your house or the grid. Exactly, or even home batteries bundled with the car. If those start to contribute significantly to profits, then ultra-low vehicle prices could transform. They could go from being a margin graveyard to actually being a powerful customer acquisition tool. Get the customer in the ecosystem.
Like the old razor and blades model, but for cars and services.
Kind of, yeah. Although it's worth noting that data and cyber regulations in Europe are pretty strict, and they present an open question for how easily these data-heavy services might evolve there. It's not going to be a free-for-all on customer data like it might be elsewhere.
Good point. Finally, what are the implications of all this for the Western incumbents' exposure in China? What does this mean for the big global car brands not based in China, especially if their China operations have historically been so lucrative?
Well, Reuters data already shows a pretty steep slide for the top 5 foreign joint venture players in China. Their market share is eroding fast. If this significant cash machine, which China has long been for these Western brands, continues to shrink, well, Western incumbents will face much harder choices back home in Europe.
How so?
Regarding their pricing strategies, their model cadence, how quickly they bring out new models. They'll need to adjust if they want to remain competitive against these new aggressive entrants from China. It could force them to make difficult decisions they've perhaps been able to avoid while their China profits basically subsidize other operations.
A shrinking safety net, basically.
Exactly. So in essence, the piece, the original analysis, correctly identifies the symptoms, the showy dominance abroad and the brutal price competition at home. That part's right. However, the idea of permanent involution maybe underestimates 3 critical moving parts. First, there's policy discipline from Beijing that is actively tightening things up. Second, there are falling cost curves, especially in batteries, that make some of these low prices actually rational from a business perspective rather than purely destructive. And third, you have these route-around strategies like focusing on hybrids and localizing production that are definitely blunting the direct impact of tariffs. It's a far more complex and adaptive landscape than just a simple race to the bottom.
Right. So the battlefield is undoubtedly brutal, no question, but it's clearly not static. It's constantly shifting. The next, say, 12 to 18 months feel crucial. It will hinge on whether Beijing's new rules actually force a significant shakeout among the weaker car makers, and whether the leading Chinese firms can translate their European expansion into durable, sustainable margins without relying purely on those unsustainably deep discounts. It's a complex, evolving story, and one that will absolutely continue to reshape the global automotive landscape. Something to think about. As you consider your next car purchase, just remember the immense global forces shaping what's even available on the lot and how quickly those dynamics are changing just beneath the surface. Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.